This is called How I Spent the Apocalypse Soul-Searching in the Skies over Skibbereen. Written November 7th to 9th for the Lit Lounge. Greetings from the end of the fucking world. At least, that's what all my friends keep telling me. Apparently, the worst has happened and society is on the brink of collapse. Personally, I'm writing from a cozy retreat in the foggy rolling hills of Skibbereen. No television, no radio, and trying not to look at my phone. Nevertheless, the garbled noise of humanity and inhumanity thrown into a blender makes its way somehow into every home. It's hard to believe that just a few short weeks ago, I was drifting across the Australian outback, 2 days' drive from any city, playing guitar under the stars with my friends at night, smoking grass and talking about poetry, hugging and crying and yelling at the moon from along what felt like an endless stretch of desert highway. Living as though there were nothing to consider but the wild beauty of the cosmic jive and whatever potentially spiritual questions it might provoke. Of course, even in the far reaches of nowhere, there is always the specter of death. One day we stopped at a phone box and I got word that my brother had perished in a house fire. Another day, Maxine came inches from stepping on a venomous eastern brown snake. Now and then, we'd glimpse a newspaper at a gas station and be reminded of the ongoing horror and atrocity of global current events. Yet, despite all this, I was free. Awaking to the bird calls and rolling into the almost summer sun with the wind in my hair, a notebook in my lap, as many possible futures as I could dream, and nobody for thousands of miles in any direction trying to get me to do anything I didn't want to do. Then suddenly, the trip was over, and I returned home to Paris. A cold, gray, rainy, almost winter Paris, with sidewalks full of dog shit and dour faces. It quickly felt familiar as the backdrop of last year's depression, the scenery of a heartbreak, a city where I'd always been poor, undocumented, struggling, not good enough. A competitive place where I had done a lot of losing and had to paddle very hard to keep my nose above the floodline of difficult memories. The first several days I was demoralized by jet lag and overwhelmed by the return of my obligations and practical concerns, grieving the poetic vision I'd had of myself on the road when I saw it dissolve back into the muck of real life. I was newly confronted by the loss of my brother, the war, the weather, my bank account, all of which hit me harder without the emotional support of the dreamy, faraway landscape into which I had so wholeheartedly projected myself. I went out to a couple of events, but I couldn't seem to plug back in or find the rhythm in which I used to dance with the city. I found myself withdrawing, avoiding interactions, or complaining about being home to anyone near enough to hear me. After a couple of weeks of this, my friend Rich suggested that maybe it would cheer me up and renew my appreciation of Paris if we went out to see some art. I almost didn't go. But Rich is someone who I usually have a good time with, and also someone who knows a lot about art, so I accepted his invitation, and I wound up being very glad I did. A day of art and conversation with a dear friend turned out to be exactly what I needed. We hit a couple of museums, saw the shows that had opened while I was away, paintings, sculptures, interactive installations, plenty of things that touched off conceptual discussions and helped me loosen my mind from the grip of its preoccupations. But the real epiphany came at a show of early works by Jackson Pollock. A text on the wall described a road trip across the states during which the young Pollock had stopped along the routes to, quote, sketch the workers coming out of the local factories and those laboring in the fields. As we stood there reading it, Rich remarked that he was looking forward to reading what I had written about the people I'd encountered in Australia. And right then, just for a brief moment, I was swept through by a dark feeling, a recoiling feeling, a fight or flight feeling. Man, fuck Jackson Pollock, I heard myself mumble, not even knowing why. My mood turning jagged such that it surprised me. Who the hell is he to depict the experience of the working man, to tell their story? But of course, what I really meant was, who the hell am I? I've never been much of a worker, or a rich man either, and I don't know if I understand anybody well enough to speak for them. When I was 9 years old, my parents moved us to a town where the locals thought I talked funny, and it was the kids from the working class families who beat the shit out of me every day until I wound up dropping out of school and living on the street. And they didn't care that my father was a farmer, a soldier, a hardware salesman, a humble working man himself. But since then, it's often been the wealthy who have held me down, because I never finished school, never lived in the right neighborhood, never had the right connections or clothes, couldn't afford to meet up at the swanky restaurant, despite supposedly having an accent posh enough to deserve a punch in the face. I've had lovers leave me because I couldn't provide for a stable future, new friends stop answering my messages once they've had a look at the tiny room I live in, and it doesn't seem to make much of a difference whether I've read the important books or whether I am morally upstanding. So, frankly, I don't carry around a whole lot of loyalty for either the rich or the people who work for them. And anyway, since when are those the only two kinds of people to be? If I'm being perfectly honest, I'm not terribly interested in the mechanics of society at all. I would very much like to just eat a large bag of psychedelic mushrooms, lie down in a field, and allow my spirit to escape into the sky where it can explore a more diverse array of methods for dancing with the other collections of molecules to the music of the intergalactic situation, which is a way bigger production than whatever the hell we're all killing each other about down here.
Amen.
I don't honestly even know if I mean that as a comment about death or God or physics or just some lazy half-baked reference to meditation. But that's exactly the stuff I'd like to lie down and have a think about instead of spending this afternoon thinking about money, politics, violence, or the frailty of my aging body. I don't feel like I've had adequate opportunity to fully consider what makes it worthwhile to be on the planet at all. And still, I feel guilty for saying so, because it is only with a great deal of privilege that one could even formulate such a luxurious desire. Even if you earn your free time by eating discarded food and sleeping outdoors, you must still live somewhere that is warm enough, safe enough, where people have food to discard, where your evil overlords protect you from invasion by the other evil overlords, which means they do unspeakable shit in your name and then painstakingly re-narrativize it for you to provide a plausible sense of distance from any complicity. And even when you have all that, you sometimes just feel like a dick because your neighbor is working 2 jobs to care for a kid with cancer, or your friend's family just lost their home in a bombing, or even because your brother just died and you don't have any idea how to honor his memory. So when you do manage to lie down in the grass for a few hours and trip out about abstract philosophy, or wander around in a museum all day trying to decide what you think of expressionism, you're always a little bit haunted by the idea that you better come back from that experience with something to say that's going to do everybody some good and offset some of the problematic moral footprint that you imagine you're probably standing in. So I was standing in front of the Jackson Pollock thing when I realized that I feel useless, helpless, defensive, because I don't know what to say for the worker or the Australian or the wealthy or the sick or the victims of genocide or the dead or the perpetrators or damn near anyone else. I fell in love with books because they promised me an escape. A way to run off with the groovy, poetic people and forget about the small town bullies who bashed my head into lockers and pushed my face into the toilet. But now the bullies are on TV, ruling the world, and I don't know what to say about that either. Except that I'm pretty sure I'm not going to solve anything just by grinding my years away at a shitty job or by amassing enough money that I can tell others what to do. So my epiphany, my realization, my big confession is that I am still running away from violence, from class, from the obscene capitalist myth of moral labor, from all the same things I was running away from at 14. This week, instead of staying home to scream and cry about the news with my friends and neighbors, I have run away to Ireland to gaze into the misty sky and have vague feelings about poetry. And I can't even decide for sure whether I think that is a cowardly or courageous thing. Whether my alienation from the prevailing ways of the world is a fault of mine or a quality. So I don't know who on earth that puts me in a position to speak for. If I'm lucky, maybe there's a vast population of lower middle class American white kids who feel sorry for themselves because they can't afford therapy for their formative traumas. Or maybe on a good day, I could say something for the poets, the artists, the outcasts, the loners, the freaks. But what would I say for them if given the chance? I suppose I would probably say something like, give your loyalty, your allegiance, your priority, your service, your time to those around you who are trying to do something beautiful with their lives, who are trying to liberate rather than control and diminish you. And hold on to those people with all your heart. Because even when it feels like the world is ending, it goes on. Whether we treat it as real or fake, whether we dress it up in niceties or hate, however many times we return or escape. So don't sell your faith too cheaply to the bosses, the companies, the politicians who drain and reduce you to ones and zeros. Use your energy to read each other's poetry, to look at each other's paintings, to congratulate each other for every fragment of your naked human spirit that you somehow find the courage to harness and express. Subtract the power of your will from the gluttonous machine and invest it in the nurturing of life, of creation, of empathy. Then if you still have some time, at the end of the day, maybe you can lie down and look at the sky.